Good evening. Khalid Masood, the man who unleashed terror on London last week, was on WhatsApp minutes before he struck. Was he getting directions from someone? The British government has turned the heat on social media giants, saying that they shouldn't provide terrorists, quote-unquote, a secret place to communicate. ISIS used WhatsApp and other encrypted apps to plot the Paris attacks too. It has become a pattern of sorts, and governments the world over are now asking for access. Encrypted messages are terror tools, they say. The choice is between privacy and fighting terror. Or is it? On Gravitas tonight, we ask if it's time to rewrite the privacy rules for the sake of safety. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. The headlines this Tuesday. US President Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, faces Senate probe on Russian links with the American election amid reports that he met a sanctioned bank that acts as a front for Russian espionage. The Lahore High Court asks the Pakistan government to explain on what grounds it has detained Jamaat-ud-Dawa chief Hafiz Saeed without trial. He's been under house arrest for 2 months. Cyclone Debbie batters Australia, causing major damage, torrential rain and power cuts to tens of thousands of homes. India skips the first UN conference on nuclear weapons ban in more than 20 years amid objections from major nuclear powers. And the world's most famous footballer, Lionel Messi, is banned for 4 games by FIFA for insulting a referee during a World Cup qualifier. So exactly a week after the Westminster attacks, the media and the government in Britain have found a new culprit: social media. Look at the headlines. Google the terrorist's friend, scream headlines in British newspapers. The Home Secretary Amber Rudd has promised to launch what is being called the terror crackdown on internet giants. Take a look.
Place for terrorists to hide. We need to make sure that organisations like WhatsApp, and there are plenty of others like that, don't provide a secret place for terrorists to communicate with each other. But on this situation, we need to make sure that our intelligence services have the ability to get into situations like encrypted WhatsApp.
Critics say Rudd's approach is naive at best and a brazen attempt at backdoor entry at worst. What governments are unhappy about is encryption. What is it and how does it work? Here's a quick report.
Messaging apps such as Apple iMessage, WhatsApp, Messenger, Line, Viber, and Telegram come with encryption technology, but the usage differs from app to app. The idea behind end-to-end encryption is to prevent snooping on digital conversations. End-to-end encryption secures your messages, photos, videos, voice messages, documents, status updates, and calls, and prevents them from falling into wrong hands. Facebook Messenger uses the same encryption technology as WhatsApp. While WhatsApp messages, in entirety, are encrypted by default, Facebook Messenger users must turn on the feature to get the extra additional security protection. Messenger users, however, can't send videos or make payments in encrypted conversations. iMessage is also end-to-end encrypted by default between iPhones. But this end-to-end encryption doesn't work if the communication is happening between an iPhone and a non-iPhone device. Because in such a case, iMessage responds to unencrypted messages. Telegram doesn't offer end-to-end encryption for chats by default. However, users have a secret chats option to have one-on-one chats wherein messages are encrypted. Bureau Report, WION.
Joining us this evening on Gravitas, Arun Mohan Sukumar. He's the head of the Cyber Security and Internet Governance Initiative at ORF. Joining us from Delhi, Sahil Maniktala, my colleague here at WION, a tech correspondent. We'll be joined by Joel Whitaker, security analyst from London. Good evening to all of you. Arun, let me come to you first. Does the government have good reason to ask for these details, to ask for this access?
Oh, absolutely. Whether it should ask for encrypted data or whether it should seek backdoors into encryption is another matter. But I think it's a reality that governments today are struggling, as most folks who use the internet switch to channels and platforms that are end-to-end encrypted. And this is a problem, especially for countries like India, where the capacity of, say, a law enforcement agency is limited. And the ability to crack encrypted data or the ability to prosecute a cybercrime or a criminal investigation that involves an electronic component is extremely limited. So if we are hearing about this debate and we are debating this in channels today because the UK government, despite all its capacities, has struggled to make sense of a terrorist investigation that involves an encrypted platform. But you can imagine the plight of say, an Indian government or any emerging economy where the security official or the law enforcement agency just doesn't have the capacity to break encryption or decipher information that is being communicated in back channels behind extreme secrecy. So this is a problem, and the trend that is being reflected today that has been communicated by the British Home Secretary is a trend that is endorsed in many parts of the world.
Joel Whitaker, is this an overreaction, or does the government again has good reason to ask for details of encrypted messages?
Yeah, I mean, it is expected that the government would ask any organisation that provides encryption services like WhatsApp, like Telegram, and many others. It is expected that they would ask for permission. But it could also be the case that they actually already do have permission, or already do have some kind of backdoor access to many of these encrypted devices. Let's not forget, just 10 or 15 years ago, this level of encryption, this level of security was really top secret. It wasn't given out to the general public. It was used really just purely by the security services, not by the everyday person on the street. And so absolutely, the government will be asking to get access to those devices and those applications. And we could assume that perhaps they already have access as well.
Sahil, WhatsApp's privacy protections have been questioned. What has that got to do with end-to-end encryption? How does it exactly work for our viewers' benefit?
So several chat app services provide this technique known as end-to-end encryption. So what that means is like even now we know that WhatsApp uses it, we know that Facebook uses it, we know that iMessage uses it. Then there are certain chat app service providers that don't use it, such as Telegram. We know that Telegram doesn't use it, but then it does provide users with that option if they want to opt for encryption. They have this secret chat option that they can do that on Telegram as well. Now, once something like end-to-end encryption is activated, what that means is once a message has been sent, it becomes digitally scrambled. And once it becomes digitally scrambled, then a tech provider like WhatsApp is not privy to the content of that message, even if that message goes through their private computer servers. So once something like end-to-end encryption is activated, there's very little information that WhatsApp can disclose to the police. But that being said, there have been instances when WhatsApp and the police have worked in collaboration, and WhatsApp has shared information to the police, and this is thanks to something known as metadata. Now, metadata is very interesting because once any message is ever sent, it leaves behind this certain clue, these certain traces, something like it tells you information like when that message was sent, whom that message was sent to. It can even reveal the identity of the receiver of that message. So that sort of information in the past has been shared to the police by WhatsApp in several instances. Now, what happens is, once that happens, a lot of information goes to the police and a lot of collaboration work does take place. But in this instance as well, it's not like, WhatsApp has put their hands up and said, oh, we will not provide any help to the police, we will not give them any information. It's just the case that once a message becomes digitally scrambled, providers like WhatsApp, their hands basically get tied, and there's not a lot they can do to help police authorities in a situation like this.
Right. Arun, when we talk about backdoor access, what exactly does it mean? Is it selective access? Is that even possible? Does technology provide for it?
So one way technology companies and law enforcement agencies are looking at backdoor access is to provide a private key to, say, the CBI or the FBI, which will essentially ensure that all communications that is intended for one person can be decrypted not just by that person, but also by the law enforcement agency in question. But the problem with backdoors, which is now universally acknowledged, is that if you provide a backdoor, then that private key or that entry into this encrypted conversation can not only be accessed by the law enforcement agency, but also any, say a criminal who wants to perpetrate, say, an identity theft or electronic fraud or whatever misdeed he or she would like to. So a backdoor is not just a backdoor for a law enforcement agency, but a backdoor for anyone, and that creates that renders the overall ecosystem vulnerable, goes the argument.
And knowing all of this, Joel, the governments the world over, not just in the UK, have at different points in time raised this issue that end-to-end encryption needs to end, or they need to get access. Do you believe that the downs are more than the ups for them to make this point repeatedly? Do they have good reason?
Yeah, I mean, clearly, with the technology that is assisting terrorists and criminals globally on an increasing basis, I'm not surprised that the governments are trying to get as much access as they can. But of course, the question remains, how much do you trust the government? How much do you trust the UK government and the Indian government and the Turkish government? And so there's a matter of trust. So there's a fine balance, I believe, between what the governments would like to achieve via access to encryption and encryption devices and encryption applications and privacy. But I'm sure that many of the public would agree that perhaps it's in the better interests that governments do get access to encryption. But of course, that's quite a large debate.
Right. I'm going to request you all to stay with us. What weakens the case of social media companies like Facebook owned WhatsApp is the fact that terrorists have used their technology to coordinate attacks repeatedly. The London attacker we know, Khalid Masood, was on WhatsApp minutes before the attack took place. ISIS, as security agencies have now verified, plotted Paris attacks on WhatsApp. There was panic messaging in Delhi and Bengaluru post the Peshawar attacks back in 2014, and those messages were also spread on WhatsApp. In the US, the San Bernardino mass shooter discussed jihad on social media. That's again something that security agencies have verified and raised at different points in time. But there's also a flip side as to how governments use this or abuse this, rather. We've seen in Russia, we've seen in other parts of the world. In Turkey, for instance, 10,000 people have been put under investigation for dissent in the name of anti-terror activities. So it plays both ways. Arun, if I could come to you on this, the frustration of security agencies is understandable, but this is a double-edged sword. Where do we draw the line?
Absolutely. I think perhaps you are referring to instances where there has been mass surveillance. Now, I think there are enough checks and balances that can be put in a country's law or through constitutional safeguards to prevent mass surveillance, where instances like you mentioned, where tens and thousands of people are being put under the scanner by law enforcement agencies. But you're also talking about scenarios where quote-unquote lone wolf attempts a terrorist attack, as seems to be the case with the recent stabbing in London. So how do you factor for these instances where there are certain individuals known to the intelligence agencies, known to the law enforcement agencies, who perpetrate attacks and who communicate information of these attacks ahead of their commission through encrypted channels? So I think there has to be a distinction that needs to be made between mass surveillance, which is obviously bad and which can be checked through legislation, and the access to encrypted communication. I don't think even the British government, despite the comments that have been made yesterday, I don't think the British government too is suggesting that encryption is bad per se. I think it keeps the overall digital ecosystem secure. It's much needed for the security and integrity, not just of people who use WhatsApp, but also for businesses who need to keep that data secure. But I think technology must account for the fact that political realities and security realities require access on exceptional circumstances to encrypted content.
Joel, the criticism of the UK Home Secretary has been fierce. So what is it that the critics fear in a country like the United Kingdom? I mean, we are talking about Turkey and Russia, but in the UK, do people still feel that the government is going to use it or abuse it?
Yes, I think it's a fear of freedom. I think it's a fear of Big Brother, of surveillance in a country that is renowned for being able to have freedom of the media and of public opinion. So there's certainly a fear there. But I think that's balanced to some degree with the realization that actually the security services, the government, but particularly the security services of the UK, actually do need to get control and retain control of terrorism using digital means, using the internet, using encrypted devices. So I think there's a joint debate going on between the need for freedoms and the need to intrude on that freedom potentially to save the public from another terrorist attack.
Sahil, do you believe that the time has come to change the rules?
No, I don't think we need to change anything because, we have to realize that one of the main reasons why people find something like WhatsApp so attractive is because of something like end-to-end encryption. Because, we live in this day and age where people are aware, where users are aware that their data is at risk, that their security is at risk from potential hackers who want to do them harm and want to steal their information. So I think, absolutely rules, once again to answer your question, absolutely the rules don't need to change because why change something? Why try to fix something when it's actually not broken? Because the one thing that protects these people, the users against hackers who want to steal their personal information is something like encryption. So if something isn't broken, there's no point fixing it, Palki.
Right, and the government's focusing on the more popular means of online communication, but there are many platforms, we can tell you, less talked about and more effective that escape scrutiny. And we are bringing some examples for you. Signal, which is an encrypted chat app. It is approved by the likes of Edward Snowden, no less. Secure Chat, again, open source. It operates with another secure chat app. Telegram, which Sahil was talking about, multi-platform support, replacing email and secure messaging. Cirrus, it's an Android voice, video and messaging app that is also widely used, we are told. Private, it's a corporate app for high-end mobile security. Silent Phone, secure messaging, video and voice calls is what it's used for. Wicker, secure messaging again, it's an app with an expiration date for messages. And Glyph, again a secure messaging app for all companies, all computing devices rather. So the question then is this, Arun. There were these attacks before we had tools like this, before we had a WhatsApp, before we had a Facebook. We saw terror attacks, and there might be more in the future. Is this just an attempt by governments to deflect blame?
Well, absolutely not. I think there is a problem with the system. I do believe the system is broken, and I think it needs to be fixed. Countries have always had what we call mutual legal assistance treaties. So in the instance a crime happens in, say, the United States, and India has a mutual legal assistance treaty with the United States, the expectation is that the US will share information with India. Now, if I could just illustrate how this MLAT system has completely broken down. when it deals with digital communications. If a cop sitting in Karnataka or Andhra Pradesh or New Delhi wants to get access to WhatsApp communications or Gmail communications or basically any correspondence that has been made electronically, he or she first has to submit a request to, it could be to the Central Bureau of Investigation or the Home Ministry, which is then forwarded to the US Embassy in New Delhi, which is then forwarded to the US Department of Justice, which is then forwarded to the US company, which is then vetted for a series of legal checks and balances that is based on US law, not on Indian law. And finally, after months of processing, it may or may not come back with effective results to the Indian law enforcement agency or the cop who's trying to prosecute this criminal investigation. As a result of these delays and breakdowns in the system, you are seeing a situation where countries which do not have the capacity to, say, break encryption, or which do not have the capacity to do effective intelligence, simply not able to tackle electronic crimes. So I do not think it's a facade. There are instances where, say, authoritarian governments use these backdoors or other methods of decryption to surveil on their respective populations. But I do feel that there is a legitimate case to be made for security agencies and their access to information. How this information can be accessed is, there are no easy solutions to this problem of encryption. For one, technology seems to be developing in Silicon Valley and other parts of the world without any conversation happening between the technologists who actually develop them and the police officials who need the information either moments before a terrorist attack or immediately after a cybercrime has been committed. Unless there is a conversation happening between these two groups, which currently don't speak to each other, I don't see how the system can continue to exist as it is.
Joel, WhatsApp is popular, Google is popular, and governments tend to go after these platforms. But we just showed our viewers a list of many other options. If you want to have encrypted conversations, how many apps can and will governments then target?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the bigger sort of picture is how effective security services, unfortunately, will always be on the back foot when it comes to acts committed by criminals and terrorists, because they get to pick and choose their means of communication. They use those means of communication, like they have done with WhatsApp and with Telegram and many others, and then the government and security services pick up on this and attempt to deal with it. Well, whilst they're attempting to deal with it, of course, the criminals and the terrorists are finding new means of communications, perhaps that are even online or digitalized. And so it's a really, really tough call and quite reactive by the governments. But yeah.
So Sahil, my final question to you, what is the way forward for tech companies? Surely there has to be some solution. I know it's a complex issue, but it's a tough call when you put it in this way. It's privacy versus safety.
Well, I think major tech companies, they can't behave like ostriches. They can't, hide their head under the sand and think, the problem will go away if they don't do anything. They have to combat any form of hate, any form of terror. They have to combat it head on. And and just because they're platform providers doesn't mean they get a free get out of jail card either. They have to understand that they have to reestablish their relationship with major brands. They have to reestablish their relationship with government officials, and they have to understand that everyone has to work on a symbiotic relationship rather than a relationship based out of conflict and arguments. But that being said, government, and that, for that matter, government of any country, has to realize that this is the year 2017. And while technology, has imposed some challenges to law enforcement agencies, it's also helped them greatly. And overall, I think technology has, made the world a better place and a safer place for users and for everyone else out there.
Right, we'll see how this goes forward. Thanks very much for joining us, Arun Mohan Sukumar, Sahil Maniktala and Joel Whitaker. Appreciate you all joining us here on WION. We're taking a very short break. When we come back, lots more news and discussions. Don't go away.